morning. My name is Deb Bowers. I'm standing in for Kat this morning. We welcome you to Open Circle. Out of respect to our presenters and to one another, please turn your cell phones off. Thank you. I will try and remind you to turn them back on at the end. Today, the Open Circle mission statement will be read by Kat Miller.
Open Circle provides a supportive environment to gather for social interaction and to improve our understanding of ourselves, our community, and our world. Presentations span a wide range of intellectual, cultural, physical, and spiritual topics. We do not necessarily agree with the ideas and philosophies of our presenters. We encourage you to listen with an open mind and form your own opinions.
Thank you.
I haven't done that before.
Great. Thank you, Kat. Okay, presentations at Open Circle are scheduled pretty solid until next June or so. Nevertheless, we are always happy to learn about individuals who are interested in speaking or giving a presentation. If you would like to do so, please let us know. You can contact us on that issue through our website, opencircleajijic.org. Thank you. And then we'll get back to you with more information. If you would like to receive a weekly announcement of the coming programs and are not already on our email list, you can sign up on the list that's over there by the tree near Brad, and we will get you a weekly announcement about the coming talk. Internet video streaming of Open Circle presentations are now available on YouTube under chapaladrone. If you want to see recent or past talks, that's where you can go. Thank you to our videographer, Brad Gorman, for that. Now, we would like to know who is with us at the Open Circle for the first time. Please stand so that we can welcome you. We'd just like you to stand so your neighbors can say hello. Wonderful. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, I will tell you some jokes. This is hard to do in front of Kat in the audience. She's so good at this. Okay. One day, Albert Einstein has to speak at an important science conference. On the way there, he tells his driver, who looks a little bit like him, "I'm sick of all these conferences. I always say the same things over and over again." The driver agrees. "You're right. As your driver, I attended all of them. Even though I don't know anything about science, I could give the conference in your place." "That's a great idea," says Einstein. "Let's switch places then." So they switch clothes, and as soon as they arrive, the driver dressed as Einstein goes on stage and starts giving the usual speech, while the real Einstein, dressed as the driver, sits in the audience. But in the crowd, there's one scientist who wants to impress everyone and thinks of a very difficult question to ask Einstein, hoping he won't be able to respond. So this guy stands up and interrupts the conference by posing his very difficult question. The whole room goes silent, holding their breath, waiting for the response. The driver looks at him dead in the eye and says, "Sir, your question is so easy, I'm going to let my driver answer it for me." Okay. The patient's family gathered to hear what the specialist had to say. Things don't look good. The only chance is a brain transplant. This is an experimental procedure. It might work, but the bad news is that brains are very expensive, and you will have to pay the cost yourself. "Well, how much does a brain cost?" asked the relatives. "For a male brain, $500,000. For a female brain, $200,000. The men nodded in understanding, and a few actually smirked. Then the patient's daughter says, "Why the difference in price between male brains and female brains?" "A standard pricing practice," said the head of the team. "Women's brains have to be marked down because, well, they've been used." Okay, it looks like we got time for one more. Do we need one more, Phil? Okay. A guy drives into a ditch, but luckily a farmer is there to help him out. The farmer hitches his horse, Buddy, to the car and yells, "Pull, Nellie, pull!" Buddy doesn't pull. "Pull, Buster, pull!" the farmer shouts. Buddy doesn't budge. "Pull, Coco, pull." Still nothing. Then the farmer says, "Pull, buddy, pull." And the horse slowly drags the car out of the ditch. Curious, the motorist asked the farmer why he kept calling his horse by the wrong name. "Buddy's blind," says the farmer, "and if he thought he was the only one pulling, he wouldn't even try." Okay. All right. Words of wisdom in Kat's tradition is from T.S. Eliot. "If you're not in over your head, how do you know how tall you are?" Okay. Next week's presentation will be Recovering in Chaos Part 2, presented by Pete Soderman. Last fall, Pete addressed Open Circle on his new project, Recovering in Chaos, in which he explored the then current situation in the U.S. and explained why the environment makes recovery from self-defeating behaviors, such as drug abuse, so difficult. In this presentation, Pete will discuss how the situation has worsened in the past year, some attempts to mitigate the problem, and where his research is suggesting some solutions may lie. It turns out that there may be a light at the end of the tunnel that isn't an oncoming train. Pete has nearly 30 years of experience in the recovery field and is the author of Powerless No Longer, Reprogramming Your Addictive Behavior, and Thinking Recovery, a Cognitive Approach to Self-Defeating Behaviors. So please join us for this next week. Today's centering moment will be led by David Dennis, who I did not connect with before we started. Is David here today? Oh, my bad. Sorry. Is there anyone else from the centering team who has something they could offer us? Sorry, I didn't. Barbara? Thank you.
Nothing like having to ad-lib. Good morning, everyone. So I invite you all to close your eyes if you care to, and take a few deep, cleansing breaths. And now go to your place of peace. Wherever you go, to feel oneness and at peace with yourself, with others in the world. Envision the beauty. And as you recall and envision this place, allow yourself to feel gratitude for being here in this place at this time. There are so many times and places and things that we can do that can disturb us and take away our peace. But we can always bring ourselves back to this moment, back to this place where all is well, where we're surrounded by beauty and positive, unconditional love energy. Take it in now and always.
Thank you very much. Okay. Today's presentation, Eleanor Roosevelt, One Shrewd Lady, presented by Kathleen Durham. Eleanor Roosevelt was a leader extraordinaire and fervent defender of human and civil rights. J. Edgar Hoover called her that old hoot and a dangerous person. She considered her greatest achievement to be the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which will be 70 years old on December 10th. As the world turns today, what would Eleanor say about the effectiveness of this document? Has the world moved forward or regressed in the practice of human and civil rights? Prior to moving to Ajijic, Kathleen Durham served as executive director of the Eleanor Roosevelt Center at Valkiel in Hyde Park, New York, where she provided leadership training as practiced by Eleanor Roosevelt in the areas of social justice, human rights, and socially conscious leadership. Please welcome Kathleen Durham. There you go.
Thank you. Is that good? Well, hello. Thank you for that introduction and for your humor. It was absolutely great. I'm so used to Kat doing it, but you did all right there, girl. So thank you. and if you want to live long, laugh longer is what I say about that. Last year at this very same time, I was standing on a stage in Hyde Park at Valkill. It was our biggest fundraiser of the year, and I was being honored along with some other medalists who actually had done far more than I had done. But it was such a great moment, and this is a great moment for me because I'm here in Ajijic. I have a family already who's here in Ajijic of great friends that I've met. And I've only been here, it'll be a year on November 1st. So, love it. So today I intend to talk about three things. One, Eleanor Roosevelt, who she was and what she accomplished. Two, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the impact of that document, UDHR, today. And then following my presentation, of course, we'll have a Q&A, and always there's somebody in the audience who has a story about Eleanor Roosevelt, and I'm hoping there's one here today who's willing to stand up and tell it in a short period of time. And then each of you, I hope, received a quote, and what I ask for that is one or two people to actually stand up if they got a quote that spoke to them, that they read that quote and say why and what they got from it, okay? Is that good? All right. So, where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet, they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. And unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. And without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. So said Eleanor Roosevelt, a woman who I think the fact that she was able to take her upbringing and to bring something bigger than that to the fore and to accomplish the things that she did was amazing. I mean, how many of us could have survived a mother calling us granny or ugly? How many of us could have survived a husband who had an affair with her best friend whose daughter facilitated that affair? How many of us could survive a father who she loved very much, taking her to his club in New York and forgetting that she's there and actually leaving her outside? So I'm saying that to say circumstances don't have to dictate how we be and what we do. So known as the First Lady of the World because she traveled constantly all over the world. She was born on October 11th, so she just celebrated her birthday. She died on November 7th, 1962. So this means that she lived through the Progressive Era, World War II, the 1920s, the Great Depression, Korean War, the onset of the Cold War, and the emergence of the Third World. Is there anybody here who can relate to all of that at once? No. Her father was Eleanor Roosevelt, who was President Theodore Roosevelt's younger brother. And her mother was Anna Hall, a descendant of the Livingstons. The interesting thing about Theodore Roosevelt was that he was a Republican, and he was very much fond of social justice. And his party really did not want him to become president, but because of circumstances, he did. But he was a great influence on Eleanor Roosevelt. He helped inform her interest in social justice issues, and I truly believe that she was Franklin's consciousness about that. So both her parents died when she was a child, her mother in 92 and her father in 94. After that, she went to live with her grandmother in Tivoli. So she was immersed in this female-dominated community where she was, for the first time, the focus of someone's attention, which gave her a sense of belonging and place and purpose. Her grandmother decided to send her away to school because her uncles they were drunkards, and so they would actually go and shoot out the window on the third floor of the house when Eleanor and the other women walked by. And so there was also a concern that perhaps there were some other things that could have happened in their drunkenness. So her grandmother actually sent her away to London, where she went to school, where she became a fervent student of social justice. She was educated by private tutors until she was 15. When she was sent to Allenswood, a school for girls, that had a great influence on her education and her thinking. Then she married, after she was all done with Allenswood, she came back to New York and did all of these things. She married her fifth cousin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and they became the parents of 6 children. She was known as a terrible mother, but a great grandmother. A terrible mother because she really felt that her calling was to serve the world, though she never voiced that. And besides, she would have these really deep depression kind of occurrences. So while she was doing all of this for the world, for her children, she was not the greatest of mothers, which is okay. She was a great grandmother. I'm a terrible grandmother, but nonetheless. So after Franklin was stricken with polio, she became increasingly active in politics to help maintain his interest and to assert her own personality. So I don't know if you know this, but when he got polio, he would not let anyone see him with crutches or on his legs, the legs that they had for him to stand on. So he would stand on a box so you wouldn't know that he was paralyzed. He was criticized heavily for that because people thought this was a great opportunity to raise people's consciousness about disability. But there are some fun things about Eleanor, so let me share a few of those. So she was a Roosevelt, even before she married Franklin, as I said, because she was the daughter of the younger brother of the president. At 3 years old, she was involved in a shipwreck that killed many people, and she had to be dropped in a lifeboat, and for her lifetime was really afraid of heights, water, and boats, though she confronted them all. She was 6 feet tall. Did you know that? Yeah, 6 feet tall. And as I think I said that her mother called her ugly duckling and referred to her as Granny, and said to her, she warned her that since she had no looks, she had better have good manners. Yeah. So, would we be on Prozac? Just asking. In 1935, she started writing a 500-word My Day column called, it was a syndicated newspaper column. Anybody ever had a chance to read any of those? She wrote it for 6 days a week. Oh, great. 6 days a week, 27 years, only missing 4 days, just after her husband died. Right? Yeah. I thought that was a ring. She flouted segregation laws in 1938 because she went to the Southern Conference for Human Welfare in Birmingham, Alabama. And so there was seating for white and seating for blacks. And so they wanted her, of course, to sit with the whites, and she put her seat in the middle. Yeah. She was the first president's wife to earn her own money, which she did by writing, lecturing, and broadcasting. And her earnings usually topped the president's salary. And she gave most of the money away to groups and individuals and to her family in later life. And would you believe that during her first year as First Lady, she received and answered 300,000 letters? Yeah. And I particularly like the fact that in 1946, she won a debate with Soviet delegate Andrei Vyshinsky on World War II refuge repatriation, and from that emerged as the world's foremost spokeswoman for human rights. In 1958, despite a threat from the Ku Klux Klan, who had put a $25,000 bounty on her head, she and her friend got in a car and drove to Tennessee with a gun between them on the seat, because Eleanor had a license. She had a license to carry guns. So imagine these two ladies, they're in their like 60s, 70s, they're driving past all these Ku Klux Klan men with their burning crosses. But she was determined. You mentioned, I think Deb mentioned that J. Edgar Hoover called her the old hoot owl. Well, he actually, I think the file was like 250, it's like 25,000 pages that he kept on Eleanor Roosevelt and her friends. And because he once asked her if she had, or he made a statement that she must have had colored blood. So you can read that file. You can actually see that file if you go to Hyde Park to Valkill. It's there for you to look at. She thought of him as a man whose zeal for order sometimes smacked too much of a Gestapo method. And did you know that Katharine Hepburn based her role in The African Queen on Eleanor Roosevelt? Excellent. And here's one that I'm going to have to start doing. She ate 3 chocolate-covered garlic balls every morning. Yes, I need those. Can somebody make some now? And her doctor suggested she do this to improve her memory. So if you're out there thinking I got issues, let's just go and invest in chocolate-covered garlic balls, right? Eleanor was also a very religious, well, I won't say religious, she was very spiritual, is what she was. This is a story Harry Belafonte told me about her, that he thought of her as his second mother. As a young man, he became interested in archery, and so Eleanor Roosevelt started an archery club at Valkill. And Harry Belafonte spent much of his time with her at Hyde Park. So maybe that's where he got that great voice. I don't know. He also told me this story about Shirley Temple. That Shirley Temple was, she had this sense of this little streak of being mischievous, and so she and her mother, Shirley Temple wanted to meet the president. So the grandchildren Eleanor's grandchildren, invited her to the playhouse. And while they were there, Eleanor decided to cook up these hot dogs. And Shirley Temple reached into her purse and took out a slingshot and hit her right in the butt just as she bent over to turn these dogs. Can you see this? This little girl. Eleanor just stood right up as if nothing had happened, which is another reason I admire her so much. She didn't take herself so seriously that she was offended by so many things. Yeah. And by the way, speaking of hot dogs, you do know that she insisted on serving them to the King and Queen of England, who were petrified riding in a car with her and Franklin down this road because the road was narrow to begin with, but the way they drove, scary. And I understand that when they looked at those hot dogs, they didn't quite know what to do with them. Eleanor was a woman of first. She was the first to speak in front of a national convention. And the reason was her husband was trying to get Henry Wallace to be his vice president. And the delegates were having none of it. So he called Eleanor and said, "You must come and help me." She said, "I don't know what I can do," but she came, and she walked into this auditorium with all these men screaming, and she stood there until they were quiet, and her words were, "Gentlemen, this is no ordinary time." Now, for those of you who've ever read Doris Kearns Goodwin book, think about that's where that came from. Gentlemen, well, just this is no ordinary time. And he became the vice president. But she was a woman of first. She was the first to write a syndicated column, the first to earn money as a lecturer, the first to be a radio commentator, and the first to hold regular White House press conferences for women only. And let me tell you why she did that. Because women were not allowed in the press conferences with the president. So Eleanor, being as shrewd as she is, decided that she would give all the great news to the ladies. Yes. And so therefore the newspaper editors decided, well, we'd better start inviting these women to these press conferences. And that's how they got started. That's how Helen Thomas, I don't know if, so I met her, incredible woman. But that's her memory of her opportunity to be present at those press conferences. Yeah. You know, can I make an aside about Helen Thomas in that she made an unfortunate comment that had to do with something happening with the Jewish community. And she didn't really mean it in the way that she said it, but she was so ostracized for it. And so all the work that she had done before, forgotten, because of one comment. This is where being forgiving comes into play. Sometimes we say things, we don't really mean to say them, and they hurt, but, you know, everything just got wiped out from that. Yeah. So Eleanor worked to remedy unsafe and exploitative conditions of women-dominated workplaces, and she supported the full inclusion of them in unions. She worked on behalf of all people, particularly women, African Americans, youth, and coal miners, to ensure equal and fair treatment. And her last position was one where President Kennedy appointed her on the status of women. She was not going to vote for President Kennedy. She was not going to support him. I don't know if you know this or not, unless he stood up for the Civil Rights Bill, unless he agreed that he would put that into play when he became president. Of course, he was killed before that, and so Lyndon Johnson carried it forward. So what New Deal policies did she influence? She worried that her marriage would end her opportunity to speak out about causes she believed in, but that didn't stop Eleanor, really. So she increased the number of female appointments in his administration. She argued that women should be able to hold their jobs even if their husbands were employed, because back then, if the husband was employed, especially when the war ended and the women had to then leave their jobs to give them to the men. She created the National Youth Administration. She befriended black leaders like Mary McLeod Bethune and Walter White. She worked on setting up the Public Works Administration, and she supported enthusiastically federal aid to the arts and played a key role in establishing the Federal Arts Project. So she took a special interest in building communities. Has anybody ever been to Arthurdale in West Virginia? This was where a coal miner community, but now it's a site that you can go and visit. So as she went around the country visiting all these different people, she would use what she learned to write her column. Somewhere between the two extremes images of Eleanor Roosevelt, there were two images. One, that of the shallow, busybody First Lady, and that of the humanitarian reformer and consummate politician. She was a complex, full of contradictions and paradoxes, which is who we are as people, really. And it's okay to be all of that. We don't have to be on that same plane, which I find boring. And some people think I'm crazy because I am full of these contradictions and paradoxes, but that's okay. Some people praised her, some criticized her. Clara Booth Luce said it like this: "No woman has ever so comforted the distressed or so distressed the comfortable." Don't you love that? As a lobster fisherman said, she ain't stuck up, she ain't dressed up, and she ain't afeard to talk. Others said she was a very lovable person with an inherent dignity who looked you square in the eye, had a certain smile, and was almost spiritual to be in her presence. I do believe that her spirit still lives at Valkill. There have been times that we were in the office that things happened, like somebody got locked out, and all of a sudden, there's nobody inside, but all of a sudden the lights came on in my office. So they would always say that Eleanor was sort of roaming the grounds around there. Could be, I don't know. So even after Franklin died, she remained in the forefront, which brings me to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That she became the chair of the commission to draft the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. She was appointed by President Truman. And I think when they appointed her, they thought, well, here's a job for women. She's not, this is some busy work. But they didn't really know Eleanor Roosevelt. So she every night, she studied these documents that were incredibly complicated. But she took this on as her baby. She says she felt that this was her greatest achievement, the actual drafting of this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Has anyone in this room heard of it? Okay, great. I'm going to use UDHR as the shortened version of it. But it is the primary international articulation of the fundamental and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. I want to make the distinction between they're not rights that are legislated by law. Okay, so that like civil rights, that's completely different. So with her on this committee was René Cassin of France, who composed the first draft, Vice Chairman Chang of China, and John Humphrey of Canada. For you, any Canadians out there, if there are any left from, or have they come back yet? But she was recognized as the driving force for this, the Declaration's adoption. And she took on the Russian representative to do this. I mean, they fought tooth and nail. But, she doesn't, in the way that she dealt with people, she never dealt with their character or who they were, like, in terms of personality, but what the bigger subject was about. So she won the round on that one. they did adopt the UDHR on the 10th of December in 1948. And the reason for it, the creation of this document, was the international community vowed never again to allow atrocities like those of World War II to happen again. And so they wanted to create this roadmap to guarantee rights of individuals everywhere. So there were 18 members from various political, cultural, and religious backgrounds. So the thing about the UDHR, it's not a treaty. So it does not directly create any legal obligations for any countries. But it is an expression of the fundamental values which are allegedly shared by all members of the international community. And it has a profound influence on the development on international human rights law, because it represents the first comprehensive agreement among nations. So with the leadership from the United States initially, it was adopted. It was a bold and clear commitment that the power would no longer serve as a cover to oppress or injure people, and it established equal rights of all people to life, liberty, security of person, equal protection of the law, and freedom from torture. The thing about human rights is that they're not earned. You don't have to do a darn thing to have them. You have them because you were born, because you are a human being. Nobody gives them to you. But you know what? Because you have rights, you also have responsibilities. Often we forget the responsibility part. All we talk about are the rights that we have. So it's important to balance, because they balanced both rights and responsibilities. Each of us has a right, an individual right, to enjoy freedom from fear and want, and to make decisions that impact our lives, maintaining our obligations to be good citizens and neighbors. So first, there are the personal rights to equality, life, liberty, and then the rights that belong to the individual, the rights to privacy of family life, to marry, to freedom of movement within the national state or outside of it, to have a nationality, to asylum in case of persecution, to rights to property, and to practice a religion. And the third group is that of civil liberties and political rights that are practiced or exercised in order to contribute to the formation of government institutions to take part in the decision-making process. The fourth category is that of rights exercised in the economic and social area, and those are the rights that have to do with labor, production, education, rights to work, social security, and a free choice of employment, healthcare, among others. So where's the UDHR today? We have a mixed record. We truly have a mixed record on human rights. And despite our early leadership on human rights during the 20th century, the United States, unlike many other nations around the world, has really not ratified most of the major human rights treaties. So remember I said that it's a treaty, so in order for it to be legal in the country, it has to be ratified. So there's still many that we have not done. We withdrew, let's see, how do I want to say this? Despite our excitement and all the fervor that went with developing this document, we actually, in 1950s, stopped participating in, and in some cases directly opposed, the newly established international human rights system. One reason for this was the conflict that was stemming from the Cold War, which made it difficult to support a common standard for human rights that might leave the United States vulnerable to criticism from its enemies. The U.S. also had a domestic reason for refusing to accept the human rights law. At that time, many states in the United States practiced legally sanctioned discrimination against minorities in the form of Jim Crow laws, and the government did not want to be forced to change those discriminatory laws and policies by ratifying a treaty. As someone who certainly lived under and through those practices, I can say two things about them. One, it was the worst of time and the best of time. The best of time is that when you recognize what's in front of you and you can build the strength to know that it's not about you and to take that power on despite what the environment is saying, that's the best of times. In the 60s and 70s, we sort of recommitted our commitment to the international human rights system by signing, though not ratifying, some other treaties. One that had to do with the Convention on the Elimination of Forms of Racial Discrimination. Imagine that. One that we still have not done in this present day. We still have not ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. Can someone get me some water, please? It's just, yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks. So the only other country, the short version of this is called the CEDAW. The only other country that has not ratified this is Somalia. The second one, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that's protecting children from physical and mental abuse and hazardous work, and giving children the right to free primary education. You wouldn't think that it would be that difficult to ratify that particular treaty. The International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Family. And as you know, that would protect migrant workers and their families from abuse and inhumane treatment in countries where they work. But here's the thing. No industrialized migrant receiving country, including the United States, has signed this treaty. Yeah. So the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, President Obama signed this document, the treaty, in 2009, but the United States has yet to ratify it. We, the United States, withdrew completely from membership on the Human Rights Council in 2018, very recently, because of the idea that Israel was being picked on and the hypocrisy in allowing human rights abusing countries to belong. Now, to me, that's sort of calling the pot calling the kettle black, just a little bit, that to talk about the hypocrisy of other countries belonging to the council. Because when we look at our own record, what's it like? But nonetheless, we are not right now not members of the Human Rights Council. What is our record? So let's look at poverty. According to the census, 42.9 million Americans live below the poverty line, and the number is increasing. Child poverty is at 20.7%, the highest among the developed countries, despite the U.S. having the highest national income. So what about discrimination? Systematic discrimination and racial bias continue to exist in the U.S., for instance, as a result of unequal pay and more limited access to high-paying jobs. Women, persons with disabilities, and racial and ethnic minorities must all work more hours to achieve the same standard of living as white males. Violence against women continues to be a serious problem in the United States. Nearly 1 in 4 women is raped or beaten by a partner during adulthood, and an estimated 1.3 million women are victims of physical assault by an intimate partner each year. We continue to have problems providing equal access to justice for all and protecting the rights of prisoners. Racial profiling by law enforcement officials contributes to the disproportionately high number of minorities in prison. And despite commitments made in the international and domestic law, the US system fails to protect the human rights of migrants. Migrants experience discrimination and intimidation in the workplace, in society at large, unequal access to basic services such as health care, housing, education. The immigration policies that enlist local police in immigration raids undermine the basic trust in local law enforcement and alienate immigrant communities and create an atmosphere of fear. And I can't tell you that the migrant workers who have come to the United States to help farmers actually produce the vegetables that we also want in the United States, who come specifically for that, that's really fallen off and hurt the farmers. So not just the workers. And the thing is, here's the thing that I've learned about the families that came to New York, for example, as migrant workers to work on the apple farms. They wanted to give more than they wanted to get. So we have this program called Girls Leadership Worldwide. And it was a program that brought 72 girls from all over the world, from across all demographics. Poor, rich, Democrat, Republican, it was everything. And in that group was a young woman, a migrant worker, one of the dreamers, as they're called, and her father, her mother, their representative came up to me and said, here is some money to pay forward, to give to another girl to come to this program. Her mother made tamales to sell so that she could contribute to somebody else's a scholarship. The father gave me $150 in cash as he said, I sold my strawberries for what you did for my daisy. So I say, take another look. So we have some work to do. And it starts with who we be in this world and what we do with that beingness. So I say we need an Eleanor. So what about her that was so great? The politics of peace. That's what when she was a great political woman, but it was about peace and harmony and advocacy, just true advocacy for the good of the community, of the world, not just for oneself. And of course, a great humanitarian. And far from being a mere historical figure belonging to the distant past, she teaches us by example of her life of what a leader can be. That from one epiphany to another, someone can deepen one's relationship with oneself and others. That with tenacity, energy, and commitment to positive change, one can modify one's vision of time and spirituality. So her demonstrated leaderships were all the more remarkable because there was nothing in her background to give her the confidence usually associated with leadership, not one thing. I mean, in her marriage, her mother slept in here was their bedroom and here was the mother's bedroom. Well, actually, and Eleanor had her bedroom. And so there was always this constant something around her that we could instantly make her feel as if she were inferior. And I believe that's where that quote may have come from her, that says, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I think that's a wonderful quote. She was very conscious of her lack of a formal education. She never went to college. Yeah. But she did demonstrate her courage of conviction. She did not see color, age, sex, disability, or humble station as a detriment to accomplishment. She reached out to everyone with equanimity and a generous spirit. She made people feel a part of the circle and seldom saw problems as irreversible, which taught me to look at situations not from what the problem was, but what was the solution I was trying to get to. Because if you start with the solution, you can work your way back into what it is you're trying to overcome. She had overriding positivism combined with energy. And she had a rare ability to sense what was at the root of differences. If we just took the time to just try to figure out, why are there these differences? They aren't always what we think they are. It could be a lack of understanding, a lack of information. She was concerned for all people. So there are a couple of life lessons that her niece learned from her that I will share, and then we're going to go to a Q&A, which I'll talk about in a minute. So walk the talk. That was one of the things that she learned, was to walk the talk. So during World War II, there was, I guess there were certain goods that were scarce. So they asked people to go meatless one day a week. So Eleanor would cook in the White House. She would make scrambled eggs. Now, everybody wanted a ride. They wanted this. They wanted to come to the White House and be invited, but they all ate before they came. Could not cook. And they swear to God that she hired like the worst cook for the White House because as a passive-aggressive kind of thing against Franklin. But apparently the cook she hired couldn't cook either. So there you go. Scrambled eggs. Another thing that her name was Eleanor Roosevelt, her niece was, said to listen to the child within. Now just think if we woke up every morning and that's who we said hello to. Just envision that. What would you do? No, I know we're in Ajijic and it's easy to do that, but kind of fun. What she did was after she had worked so hard on the UDHR, she actually took her shoes off and slid down the marble floors in this building in Paris because she was so excited, just like a child. She just took off her shoes and slid. Never stop learning. Never stop learning is something that was important to her. She decided, I think it was Marshal Tito in Yugoslavia, he had a swimming pool and she found out he couldn't dive. And of course, he didn't think a lot of women anyway, but she decided that she was going to learn how to dive and then tell him about it and show him that she could do something that he couldn't do. And she was over 60 when she did this. Over 60. Yeah. And she said, you see, she says, you Americans are not afraid to dive into the unknown. They can surprise the world when they want to. And we can. We can. Don't live in fear. That was another thing that she learned, Eleanor's niece learned from her. So that all started with the Secret Service telling her that they were going to have to cut down the maple trees at Valkill because they were having to prepare for some security thing. And she said, I know you'll do your job, but you will not touch one of those trees. You can put a person behind every tree, but I will not be in fear. You will not cut those trees. Those trees are still standing at Valkill. Forgive those who make mistakes. This is a tough one for us. I think it's tough because we think we're forgiving for the purpose of the other person. But really, the forgiveness is for us. It's to free us up, not to forgive something somebody did. But the reason she learned this was one day Eleanor was she got out of a cab, and a taxi driver backed out and hit Eleanor, hit her. And she said to him, "You have got to leave right now. Don't stand around, just go, just go. You could get fired for this." And he drove off and left her there. Yeah? But she was so worried about what would happen to the taxi driver. Now, she went into her house. They wanted to take her to the hospital. She wouldn't go. She actually went to an event that night to raise money for the Jewish bond referendum. So, she just was a woman who didn't let things just stop her just because. See, me, I would have gone inside and played it all out to the end. Just saying. No? Okay. So, 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay, good. This is good. I'm done. Well, wait, not yet, yes. Okay, so we could wake up today. We wake up to a cacophony of complaints, accusations, economic woes, hate, you name it. And we can either be overcome with all that assaults our minds, or we can do as I believe Eleanor Roosevelt would have done. And I believe she would, despite the appearances of calamity, see it a different way. She would set about creating the world she wished to see, rather than sitting around crabbing about it, and she would live the life of democracy as though it were true, because, as she said, "I believe because I live as though it were true." And it has been said about her, it was in her living of the principles of human rights that one realized what they really are: faith in the capacity of people to develop and to rule and to become great people themselves. I believe we can all be an Eleanor in our own right, accept and act on our obligations for a better community and a world, rise to our greatness, believe in our vision, act on our beliefs, and in her words, surely in the light of history, it is more intelligent to hope rather than to fear, to try rather than not. For one thing we know beyond all doubt, nothing has ever been achieved by the person who says it cannot be done. And with that, I would like to open this up to questions and answers. And thank you. So, you do that first. Can I open it up to Q&A?
Yes, that'd be fine. That's about all the time we're going to have.
Okay, great. So quick Q&A, and please keep it short. Yes.
No, it's
Pardon me.
my turn.
If you'll raise your hand.
Thank you for a very moving experience, and it makes me very sad to think that Eleanor Roosevelt is not alive today on the world stage. So the question is, if she were president of the United States today instead of what's there now, how would the world be different?
I think I don't have enough time.
I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about her life at Valkill and when she went to Valkill. Did she go there when her mother-in-law was in residence?
Excellent question. So Valkill was created as a retreat for the family. So, and while Eleanor actually never lived there until the president died, but she would come on weekends and spend time with the family. At some point, her two friends, Marian Anderson and Cook, created what they called Valkill Industries. They produced furniture as a way to create opportunities for work in the community. Now, if you own a piece of Valkill furniture, I want to tell you, you got something going for you. It's worth so much money. It went bankrupt, but if you got a piece, you'll do well with it. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to where the microphone is. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? Yes. My name is Jack Krueger. I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Hey, Jack.
Hi.
I'm from Rhinebeck, New York.
I imagine I might be one of the few people here that have met Eleanor Roosevelt.
Excellent, yay!
I'm not sure of the year. She came to Brooklyn College to give a talk, there was a sea of people on the campus. It was shoulder to shoulder. And I'll never forget her words. It was either near the end of the war or right after the end of the war, maybe 47, 48. She made an analogy. She had visited a submarine. She went into the submarine, and it's very, very tight. And yet people learned to live together. She was making an analogy with the whole world as the world is shrinking and shrinking. And it's something that I can never forget.
Yeah.
I happen to also have been, on April 12th, 1945, recovering in a hospital in the South, in Augusta, Georgia, when we got word that Franklin Delano Roosevelt died. It's another date I'll never forget, because the anti-Semitic sentiments of a lot of these rednecks in the South was unbelievable. The Jews lost their best friend. That's all I heard. So, but before I end, I was waiting, unless I missed it. Did you say anything about Marian Anderson?
I did not. Would you
like to say something?
Of course, if anyone wants to hear it. So Marian Anderson was a singer. I actually have a pair of her shoes in my house, which someone brought to my office because her mother and Eleanor Roosevelt were friends in Connecticut. Eleanor was a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And Marian Anderson had been invited to sing at Constitution Hall, and the Daughters of the American Revolution denied that opportunity for her to do so. So instead, she sang on the steps of the Jefferson Memorial. But I would like to say this, that Marian Anderson did go back and sing at Constitution Hall at the invitation of the Daughters of the American Revolution. I don't have enough time to go into how all that happened, but things that you think are what you think they are, never quite the same. Yes.
This is not about Eleanor Roosevelt. It's more about you. I'd like to know how and why you became involved in Valkill.
Oh, that's an easy one. So, I'm a recovering attorney, and so
That's great.
And I had always, someone invited me to sit on the board at the Eleanor Roosevelt Center. And at the first board meeting, I volunteered to facilitate a mission statement. So he said, okay, that's great. So we set up this meeting, and the then executive director, before the meeting started, said, wait, before you get started, I'm actually resigning. And so I said, you know what? I love Eleanor Roosevelt. I'll just do this until you find somebody else. This is just within the first 30 days of my relationship, although I had been doing talks there as part of my work in the community. So anyway, on April Fool's Day of 2008, I started work at the Eleanor Roosevelt Center, and they didn't even tell me the security code. They just gave me a key, and I put it in, and all of a sudden, all I hear is, intruder, intruder, intruder.
Great.
That was my welcome. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But anyway, once you're there, you're
That's
there. You're
great.
just hooked, you know? Okay, yes.
Back here, we have a question.
Oh.
And then I just need a quote, so you got to,
Okay.
like...
Yeah, we're almost out of time.
This is the last
One last
This
question.
this is a very quick question, but thank you for you're a charismatic, amazing, funny person. I'm sure that Eleanor would be very proud. And my question is, for further exploration, do you have a favorite biography?
Actually, I always tell people, read her books about herself. Read her autobiography. There are about 16 of them, I think, that have something that she has written herself. This is how you learn the most about her. But Joseph Lash is one of them who wrote about her. But if you go on the George Washington University website and you put in Eleanor Roosevelt's name, it will come up with a list of things that you can read. But I always tell people, read what she wrote and you will know her. You will actually know her. I've been privileged to have met her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren and her great-great-grandchildren. Amazing, amazing people. Very simple. Very, very simple. Okay, so there's no more time for questions. However, there must be two of you out there who got a quote that you believe spoke directly to you. And if that's the truth, I would love you to stand up, read it, and tell us why, but you got to do it fast. Who's going to be the first? Okay, we got one over here.
Justice cannot be for one side alone, but must be for both. And it spoke to me because my parents were old socialists in the labor movement.
Yay!
Nice.
Woohoo! Okay, who else? One more. Nobody? We got nothing? Yes, over there.
This spoke to me because my daughter is going through a divorce in which she is demonizing the man that she lived with, that she was married to for 5 years. And I don't know how to talk to her about that, her anger and her demonization. A mature person is one who does not think only in absolutes, who is able to be objective even when deeply stirred emotionally, who has learned that there is both good and bad in all people and in all things, and who walks humbly and deals charitably with the circumstances of life, knowing that in this world, no one is all-knowing, and therefore all of us need both love and charity.
There you go. Awesome!
Very nice.
Okay, so in ending this, please just stand up. I want you to say this quote, okay? Come on, stand up. All right, this is an Eleanor quote. The future belongs to those who believe in their dreams. So I want you to repeat. The future belongs to those who believe in their dreams. I have a dream.
I have a dream.
I act on that dream.
I act on that dream.
And I do it now.
And I do it now.
So all I ask you is, as you act on your dreams and your desires, may your philosophies keep pace with your technologies. May your compassion keep pace with your powers. And may love, not fear, be the engine of change. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. We're done. Please be sure and pick up the things on your cups and things. Stack your chairs, please. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week.
Single and